Harold sat by the window of his quiet home in upstate New York. It was the same window where, for nearly 40 years, he and his late wife, Margaret, would sip tea in the early morning light. They used to watch the seasons change through that glass pane, sharing stories and laughter like old songs on repeat. That morning, the light came in just the same, but everything else had changed. In Harold's hand was a letter. The envelope was blank, never sealed, never stamped. It wasn't written to Margaret. It wasn't even for his children. It was addressed to someone new. Her name was Ellen. He had met her at the community garden, just 3 months after what would have been his 40th wedding anniversary. She smiled at him the way Margaret used to, not because she was trying to replace anything, but because she wasn't trying at all. "Dear Ellen," the letter began, "I never thought I'd feel this way again. But before I ask you to be part of my future, I need to be honest, with you and with myself." Harold never sent the letter, not because he didn't mean it, but because he wasn't sure. Not sure if it was the right time, not sure if it was the right decision, not sure if he was about to open the door to something beautiful or walk straight into a storm he hadn't prepared for. He's not alone. Across the country, across the world, thousands of people over 60 are quietly asking themselves the same question. Is it too late to fall in love again? Is remarriage just a second chance at happiness or a disruption to the peace they've worked a lifetime to build? Marriage after 60 isn't what it used to be. It's not about raising children or buying a home or building a future from scratch. It's about something quieter: companionship, stability, the comfort of shared mornings and quiet evenings. But it's also about risk, emotional, financial, legal. And if you're not careful, it can bring consequences you never saw coming. That's why before taking that next step, there are 5 truths everyone should understand. Not just facts, but deep, sometimes uncomfortable realities that can change how you see love, commitment, and happiness in this chapter of life. Let's begin with the one most people overlook. The first truth is this: love at this stage of life may be free, but remarriage is not. In fact, it can cost far more than anyone expects. Harold had assumed that, should he ever remarry, it would be simple. He had a pension, a small retirement account, and a house he hoped to leave to his children. But once he started considering marriage again, everything became complicated. He didn't know that remarrying could affect his Social Security benefits. He didn't realize that some of the pension benefits Margaret would have received would be void the moment he said "I do" to someone else. And he had no idea that even with a will, his new wife might be legally entitled to a share of the home he had promised to his children. Harold's story isn't uncommon. Many people assume that later life marriage is only about companionship, about love. But it's also a legal contract with real consequences. Even if you keep your finances separate, even if you trust each other completely, the law doesn't always care about intentions. It cares about paperwork, signatures, and state regulations. Social Security rules, for example, can reduce or eliminate spousal benefits if you remarry. Pensions with survivor clauses often only apply to the first spouse unless otherwise stated. And state laws may grant a new spouse automatic rights to property or inheritance, even if your will says otherwise. It's not romantic to talk about, but it is real. And the truth is, if you've spent your life working, saving, and planning, if you have children, grandchildren, or loved ones you hope to provide for, you need to understand how remarriage could reshape everything you put in place. That's why people like Harold, who once thought love would solve everything, end up rewriting not just their wills, but their entire understanding of what a second marriage really means. Before you remarry, take the time to talk to a financial advisor. Ask the hard questions. Update your estate plans. Consider a prenuptial agreement not because you expect failure, but because you want clarity for yourself and for those who matter to you. Because love, in its best form, is not about avoiding these conversations. It's about having them with honesty, with respect, and with the wisdom that comes from living a full life. As Harold folded the letter and placed it back in his drawer, he realized something. He didn't need to rush. The feelings were real, but the future, his future, deserved to be built with care, not just emotion. In the next chapter, we'll meet someone who did take the leap, But she soon discovered that remarriage isn't just about two people. It's about entire families, long histories, and the invisible threads that tie us to those we've loved before. Are you ready to hear her story? Susan hadn't been in love for 13 years, not since her husband Michael passed away in the early spring of 2009, leaving behind a quiet house, a garden he never finished, and three grown children who suddenly needed their mother more than ever, just as she was learning to live alone. She grieved the way strong people often do, by staying busy. She filled her days with volunteering, long walks, and holiday dinners where she smiled, carved the turkey, and quietly placed Michael's old chair at the head of the table, untouched. Her kids thought she had moved on, and in a way she had, until she met Tom. He was kind, well-read, and had a laugh that softened her edges. They started meeting for coffee, then dinners, then weekend getaways. And for the first time in years, Susan felt like a woman again. Not just a mother, not just a widow, a woman with stories yet to write. When she told her children she was thinking about getting remarried, she expected tears of joy, maybe even relief. Instead, there was silence. Her eldest son, Jacob, shifted uncomfortably. Her daughter barely looked up from her phone. And her youngest, who had once begged her to find happiness again, asked a question that pierced deeper than she expected. What happens to Dad's house? That question, innocent on the surface, revealed the truth Susan hadn't prepared for. Remarriage, especially later in life, isn't just a love story. It's a family story, and one that often unfolds with unexpected tension. While Susan was dreaming of shared mornings and second chances, her children were imagining lost memories, replaced traditions, and the sudden presence of a stranger in a space that once belonged to their father. And it's not just about the house. Susan's children were afraid of losing their connection to the past, the holidays, the photo albums, the smell of their dad's favorite coffee that still lingered in the cabinet. In their minds, a new husband meant rewriting the story and erasing the one they had cherished for so long. What Susan learned, and what so many others experience, is that remarriage after 60 doesn't just involve two people. It involves children, grandchildren, and entire family dynamics that have been decades in the making. Even the most well-meaning families can stumble over this transition. Adult children may feel protective, suspicious, or even betrayed. Not out of selfishness, but out of loyalty to the parent who is no longer there. They may worry about inheritance, family traditions, or who gets to sit at the head of the table next Thanksgiving. And that's okay. Feelings are not problems to be fixed. They're invitations to listen, to understand, and to have the conversations that matter. Susan didn't ignore her children's concerns. She invited them in. She shared her hopes, her plans, and most importantly, her boundaries. She explained that loving Tom didn't mean forgetting Michael, that finding companionship didn't mean rewriting history, and that the life she was building wasn't meant to replace the one they had. It was meant to grow beside it. They didn't come around overnight, but over time the fear softened. Her children began to see Tom not as a replacement, but as a companion to their mother's next chapter. Still, Susan made practical changes. She updated her will, created a living trust, and ensured that her children's inheritance remained protected. Not because she expected conflict, but because clarity is love too. If you're considering remarriage after 60, take time to ask the hard questions. How will this affect your children? Are you blending families? What expectations, spoken or unspoken, will come into play? Sometimes love is about setting boundaries, and sometimes it's about making room at the table for more than just one new chair. Because when love comes later in life, it often arrives with more history and more opportunity for healing than we ever imagined. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when two emotionally independent people, both with decades of experience, decide to share a life together. It's not always smooth, but when done right, it's deeply meaningful. When Harold and Susan decided to spend a weekend at her beach cottage, it seemed simple enough. They had been dating for a year, talking often about the future, about companionship, about maybe, just maybe, making it official. The cottage was small, cozy, full of driftwood art and sun-bleached towels. It had only one sink in the bathroom. Harold placed his toothbrush in the cup beside hers. Without thinking, without asking. It was a tiny gesture, almost meaningless, but to Susan it felt like a tremor, a signal. This wasn't just a weekend trip anymore. It was the start of something that might change everything about the life she had carefully rebuilt on her own. She didn't say anything. Not right away. But later that evening, while they were folding laundry, she finally asked, half joking, "So, are we a two-toothbrush couple now?" They both laughed, but the moment stuck with them, because what they were really asking, beneath the jokes and gentle smiles, was this: are we ready to share our space, our habits, our silence? Remarrying after 60 is not about starting from scratch. It's about blending two entire lives that are already full, and that comes with beautiful complexity. At this stage, most people are emotionally self-sufficient. They have daily routines, personal rituals, and the kind of solitude that no longer feels lonely, but rather earned. The house has a rhythm, the bed has a preferred side, the morning coffee has its exact strength and temperature, and then someone else walks in with their own rhythm, their own silence, their own ways. Love in our 60s or 70s isn't about completing each other. It's about learning to coexist without erasing the individual lives we've already built. That's why emotional expectations are so different now. In our 20s, we look to marriage for identity, for security, family, purpose. But now we often seek companionship, emotional support, and the freedom to be ourselves while sharing space with someone who understands. What makes this kind of relationship work isn't passion or excitement, though those can still exist. It's the mutual respect for each other's solitude. It's knowing when to reach across the bed and when to let silence do the talking. And yet, even that takes practice. Harold had been widowed for 7 years. He was used to filling the quiet with books, gardening, long walks. Susan had spent more than a decade reclaiming her independence, eating when she wanted, sleeping with the TV on, dancing in the kitchen on Wednesday nights. When they started spending more time together, they both realized something surprising. Love after 60 was not harder, but it required more grace, more unlearning, more patience. They had to talk, really talk, about things younger couples often discover by accident. How much time do we spend together? Do we live under one roof or keep two homes? How do we handle disagreements when we're both used to doing things our way? And what does being married actually mean to us now? These are not signs of incompatibility. They are signs of maturity, of two people brave enough to ask, how do we love without losing ourselves? If you're considering remarriage, it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to want space. It's okay to say, I love you, but I need the afternoons to myself, because intimacy now is not about constant presence. It's about feeling safe in the presence of someone who respects your absence. The next time you find yourself wondering if your daily life is compatible with someone else's, ask yourself this: are we building a life that honors who we've been and who we still want to become? In the next chapter, we'll explore a truth few people talk about, that love may be timeless, but marriage is still a contract, and the legal side of remarriage can either protect your future or unravel it. When Eleanor fell in love again at 67, it felt like sunlight after a long winter. She had spent the last decade building a quiet, beautiful life, a small cottage in the hills, a garden that bloomed in spring, and regular Sunday dinners with her grandchildren. So when David came into her life, a retired professor with a gentle voice and a love for jazz, she welcomed the warmth. But she also felt something she hadn't expected: hesitation. Because this time, love wasn't her only consideration. She had assets, a home, savings, and a promise she made long ago to her daughter, that when the time came, everything she had would pass to her. Eleanor wasn't afraid of David. She trusted him. But she also understood something many overlook. Love is emotional, but marriage is legal. And at this stage of life, the legal matters more than ever. When you say "I do" at 25, you rarely think about wills or medical directives. But at 65, 70, 75, those conversations are not just important, they are essential. Remarriage affects everything from property rights to healthcare decisions. If you become ill, your new spouse could legally make choices about your care. even if your children disagree. If you pass away without revising your estate plan, your new spouse could inherit assets you had meant for your family. Even the best intentions can unravel without the right documents. That's why Eleanor did something that, years ago, she might have thought was cold or unnecessary. She sat down with her attorney and David, and they created a prenuptial agreement. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she loved her family enough to bring clarity, and because she respected David enough to make everything transparent. They discussed medical power of attorney, they updated wills and trusts, they set expectations about finances, caregiving, and what would happen if one of them passed away first. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but in a way it was deeply intimate. Two people choosing honesty over assumption. When Eleanor finally walked down the aisle in a small backyard ceremony, her daughter was by her side, smiling. Not because the fear had disappeared completely, but because the future had been made clear. Remarriage is not just a second chance at love. It's a decision that touches every corner of your life. Your money, your health, your family, your legacy. If you're considering it, ask yourself, do you know how the law treats remarried couples in your state? Have you updated your will? Have you had the conversation about medical wishes, property, inheritance? These aren't questions meant to steal the magic from love. They're the questions that protect it. Because the greatest gift you can give your future partner and your family is clarity. And that kind of love is not just hopeful, it's wise. So as you stand at the edge of this new chapter, take your time. Don't rush because of loneliness. Don't wait out of fear. Reflect on what happiness means to you now. Not what it used to mean, not what others expect it to be, but what peace, love, and fulfillment look like in your life today. And whether you choose to remarry, live together, or walk beside someone without ever sharing a last name, make sure it's a choice rooted in truth, not tradition. Because at this stage in life, love isn't about proving anything. It's about peace in your heart and a future you can both live with. Thank you for joining me in this story. If this series has given you something to think about, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. What does love mean to you now? What's the one truth that changed how you see remarriage? If you found this valuable, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more people who need thoughtful, honest guidance, just like you. We'll see you again soon. Until then, choose love, choose clarity, choose what brings you peace. The story isn't over, but you get to write the next chapter.